All right, my friends, it's time for the hands-free drive to work. You know that you can keep your hands on the wheel and at the very same time have a conversation about steering yourself through the weeds of work. Listen, I took a couple days off, but I jumped up this morning just so I could make this video and send it out to you because I really spent a lot of time yesterday thinking about my next wise move. And let me ask you a question first. Have you ever been stuck between two choices? Have you ever been stuck between two choices because you didn't know what those choices would bring about in the future? Have you ever been stuck between two choices because you were unsure of how those choices would play out in the future? I know I have. I know that you have. I know even right now with what's going on in the world with COVID-19, obviously we look and we say, should we go to the grocery store? Or should we stay quarantined? There are times when both of those are wise choices. And so we look into the future and the reason we question ourselves, we say, well, can I really make it one more day without going to the grocery store? Or we might say, would I really be infected, or would I really be in contact with somebody? I can stay 6 feet apart. So my choices today are determined by what I look into the future. And a lot of times the reason we get stuck between two choices is because we're so uncertain of how those choices might play out in the future. You know, our leaders right now are feeling the same kind of pressure. They say, should we quarantine now? Should we shelter in place? Or should we wait a few days? And, sometimes they look into the future and they say, well, if I don't quarantine now, what's going to happen in the future? Will this peak really spike like, everybody's saying it's going to? Or they might say, well, if I do shelter in place, what's it going to do to the economy? Is it even going to save lives if we shelter in place? So we mess up the economy, but we also don't save lives, or we mess up the economy and we do save lives. We're not sure what these future outcomes are going to be. And that is why it's so important to be able to have a lens to look through for our next wise move. And that's what I want to give you today. I'm not going to tell you how to make your next wise move. Obviously, I talk about self-management. So I know that you actually have to make your next wise move. You're more capable of making your next wise move than anybody else on the earth. And so I just want to give you a lens, though, to look through to see your next wise move, because I know this lens will actually be able to help you. And so this lens is going to be made up of two pieces. Are you ready for these two? Just two things that you can a lens that you can look through to help you make your next wise move when the future is absolutely unknown. Number one is this. There will always be a time, there will always be a time when other people can say, you should have known better. There will always be a time when other people say you should have known better. See, look, if there's two choices in front of you, choice A and choice B, the reason it's so paralyzing sometimes to make these choices is because we look at choice B and we say, with choice B, there will be positive and negative outcomes. And so we look into the future and say, which one should I choose? I know there's going to be positive and negative outcomes with choice B. And then we turn to choice A and we say, okay, with choice A, I can look into the future and I see some positive outcomes. I see some negative outcomes. And so which one of these should I make? And we don't know exactly which positive and negative outcomes will be there. But either we can say to ourselves, or we can envision someone saying to us in the future, well, you chose B, and here are the negative outcomes. You should have known better. But we also know that if we go with choice A, then there'll be positive and negative outcomes. So people, or even ourselves, could look at us and say, here, look at these negative outcomes with choice A. You should have known better. But here's what's so freeing about knowing that there'll always be a time when somebody's going to say you should have known better. Put your lens on at your decision today and know that someone will always be able to say you should have known better. Here's why it's awesome to know that, because that should not determine which choice that you make. Because someone can always say you should have known better, then that means they can always say you should have known better. So if you choose A, they'll say you should have known better. If you choose B, they'll say you should have known better. That means that today I don't have to take that into account because I know it's going to be there. I know there's going to be things in the future that make my choice even more clear. But here's what's awesome. They can't prove that choice A would have been better either. We always say hindsight is 20/20. But listen, when you're looking at two different choices, just because you chose B, you can't really ever look back and say that A would have been better because you're not sure all of the other outcomes that would have happened after you choose A. Does that make sense to you? And look how freeing that is when you just know, hey, I know there'll be people in the future who can always say, you should have known better. Then I can make, number 2, my next wise move. The reason I always talk about my next wise move is because I can't even know what my next move is, how it's going to affect the next move after that and the next move after that. There are things about 2 weeks from now that my decisions today are going to affect. It's going to change the way I steer myself 2 weeks from now because of the decisions that I make right now today. But here's the truth. I can't know how my decision today is fully going to affect my future. And so my decision today is just based upon my next wise move. And a lot of times why we get paralyzed with our decisions is because we look at today's decision and we know that there will be another decision that comes with it 2 weeks from now. And because of that decision, we'll have to make another decision a month from then and maybe even a year from then. And then it begins to affect our entire future. And we just put that in big quotes, our future. And so then today we're paralyzed because we don't know what to do. There's too many variables in all of those decisions. And so all we can do is make our next wise move. I think about it like building a pyramid. You think about a pyramid, you have to do level 1 before you can do level 2. Because level 2 is absolutely dependent on level 1. When you're building a pyramid, you lay all the blocks for the foundation, all the blocks for level 2, 3, 4. It's sequential. We have to go in sequence. And so I can't even think about putting on that corner cap before I actually build the first few layers. And so my next wise move is to take a block and put it on top. Take a block and put it on top. That's my next wise move. And my next wise move may change in the future, but what I can do today is make my next wise move. I can't make my next 10 moves. I can only make my next wise move. So if you look at your two choices with those goggles on, maybe your left lens is the one that says, I always am going to have someone who says you should have known better. And number 2 is, instead of planning out my next 10 moves, I can only make my next wise move. Of course, when I'm looking at that pyramid, I envision the entire completed, beautiful pyramid. I think about how it's going to look when it's completely finished. But then the next thing I can do, though, instead of trying to build an entire pyramid, the next thing I can do is put on one block. So if I know that in the future someone always can say, you should have known better. And number 2, instead of making my next 10 moves, I just need to make my next wise move. If I put those lenses on today, man, I'll be a great self-manager. I'll be able to steer myself well. Let me give you just 4 quick, practical things that you need to take into account when you are making your next wise move. You can write these down and keep them forever. They'll never change. These 4 things will absolutely help you make your next wise move. Number 1 is look for counselors. If we look for counselors, that means we go out and actively seek out others who we know are wise, who make wise decisions, and who have the character traits of somebody that we want to be like. And we go to those people and we look for them for counsel. We ask them questions. How do you feel about these next wise moves? Because there'll always be somebody who wants to weigh in on your next wise move. That's why you have to actually seek out counselors. Counselors are not necessarily looking for us. You know, you're not looking, just going out trying to tell everybody what they need to do a lot of times. So great counselors a lot of times are there. They're ready to give wise advice, but you have to actually go seek that advice. So you go and ask a question. Hey, here are my 2 choices. What should be my next wise move? That would be number 1. You look for counselors. But number 2, and this one's tough, you listen to challengers. Just because someone's against you doesn't mean they don't have good ideas. It may be somebody who's absolutely trying to hurt you. It may be somebody who's even saying something that's not true about you. They may say 5 things about you, and 4 of those things are not true, but 1 is absolutely what you need to make your next wise move. And that's a mature self-manager. If you're able to listen to challengers and take the meat and leave the bones, then you're a great self-manager and you're a mature self-manager. So 1 is look for counselors. 2 is listen to challengers. Number 3 is love over lust. And we talk about this all the time with our system of self-management, last to least. We want to make ourselves the least important variable in our work equation, not the most important variable. Lust always says, what's in it for me? Ultimately, if I serve your needs, I only do it because it's going to come back to me in some way, shape, or form. I only move forward at work. I only produce. I only make that next phone call. I only go into the patient's room when I'm tired even. I only show up for class and educate students because I need that paycheck. All of it is lust. It's something that comes back to me. But love actually shows up even when it's not exactly in the moment what's best for me. And here's what is amazing about steering. I'm not telling you that love over lust is your next nice move. I'm telling you that love over lust is your next wise move, because here's what I know. Lust can steer you to places that you don't want to be. It may look like you want to be there today, but if we are driven and steered by lust over love, then we can find ourselves in places that we don't want to be in the future. But love over lust will actually steer us to the exact places that we want to be in the future, even though it seems like sacrifice today. So number 3 is love over lust. And number 4 is learn what is just. Learn what is just. If sometimes we know what's just immediately. We know what's the just thing to do. And I'm using just in the term of right. What's the right thing to do? But sometimes we have to actually learn what is just. We all come from somewhere. We grew up some way. We were raised in an area. We have our lens that we see the world through. And so sometimes what is just gets a little fuzzy. And what we need to do is we need to listen to other people. When you hear somebody make an assertion, when you hear somebody make a comment, and the first thing you think is, I don't know how anyone could ever think that. That's actually a good place to learn. If you've ever felt like this before, I have no clue how anyone could ever say that. That's a great place where you can learn. You can go ask them, hey, I don't understand how you can say that. Would you please help me understand where you're coming from? And sometimes we actually, through that process, we learn what is just, because what is just is not obvious on the surface sometimes. But if we learn to do these 4 things, if we can do these 4 things, number 1, we look for counselors. Number 2, we listen to challengers. Number 3, we love over lust. And number 4, we learn what is just. If we can do those 4 things, we will make the next wise move. We'll be excellent self-managers, and we'll be able to steer ourselves through the weeds of work, and we'll be able to steer ourselves through even turbulent times. Hey, thank you for listening to the Hands-Free Drive to Work. Think about liking, sharing. Think about commenting, because some of you are great self-managers. You make your next wise move consistently, and so we can learn from you if you comment on some of these things that we're talking about. Thank you for listening to the Hands-Free Drive to Work.